It was a bright, crisp morning in Dallas, and Aaron Green stepped confidently through the doors of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. The terminal buzzed with the usual rush of travelers. Announcements echoing overhead, people crisscrossing with luggage, eyes set on their destinations. For Aaron, today's destination was New York, where he'd be meeting with potential investors for his new venture. He was dressed simply, a black hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. Nothing about him shouted, "Son of a millionaire," or "heir to a fortune," and that was exactly the way he wanted it. Despite his father, Daniel Green, being one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Texas, Aaron had always made it a point to carve out his own path. He didn't rely on his father's wealth or name. No, he was determined to prove he could succeed based on his own merit. This business trip was his chance to show what he was capable of, and he intended to make every moment count. As Aaron approached the gate, he felt a surge of excitement mixed with nerves. He found his boarding pass for first class, a small luxury he allowed himself given the importance of this trip. He joined the line to board, mentally rehearsing his pitch, visualizing the meeting, running through possible questions. His mind was so engrossed that he barely noticed the stewardess at the entrance, eyeing him up and down with a judgmental gleam. "Your seat is in the back," she said curtly as he reached her. Aaron looked up, momentarily surprised, and then he realized she hadn't even looked at his ticket. With a calm, respectful smile, he held out his boarding pass. "Actually, I'm in seat 1A, he said, pointing to the unmistakable first class marking on his pass. The stewardess, whose name tag read Sandra Barnes, gave a dismissive sigh. "Are you sure you can afford that seat?" she asked, her voice a razor-edged whisper as she glanced him over once again, this time with open disdain. Aaron felt a prickle of irritation but kept his expression neutral. Years of practice had taught him to stay calm under pressure, and he wasn't about to let a stranger's assumptions ruin his day. "Yes, I'm sure," he replied simply, giving her a steady look before walking past her, leaving her question hanging in the air. As he moved down the aisle, Aaron couldn't shake off the strange encounter. He knew discrimination existed. He'd seen and heard about it countless times. But here, now, with his confidence and focus set on this crucial trip, it was as though Sandra's unspoken challenge was meant to throw him off balance. Instead, he held his head higher, taking his seat in first class and settling in, determined to brush off the interaction. But Sandra wasn't finished with him. As the plane prepared for takeoff, she began serving the first-class passengers, offering drinks and snacks with smiles and small talk. To everyone, that is, except Aaron. She walked past him without a word, the bright, rehearsed smile gone, replaced by a stone-faced indifference. He noticed her actions but stayed silent, refusing to let her see that it bothered him. After a while, he decided to ask politely for some water when she walked by again. "Excuse me, could I have some water, please?" Sandra turned, her face a mask of feigned politeness. "Maybe later," she replied with a curt smile, dismissing him once more. Aaron's patience began to wear thin, and he could feel the tension building around him. Whispers floated in the air, sideways glances from other passengers. He couldn't be sure, but it felt as though Sandra had somehow communicated to them, if not in words, then in attitude, that he didn't belong here. It was subtle but unmistakable, like a silent ripple moving through the cabin. Finally, a voice from the seat next to him broke the uncomfortable silence. "Hey, man, don't let her get to you," said Michael Wilson, a fellow passenger with a kind smile. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I've seen her do this before. She has her. Let's just say she has her biases." Aaron gave Michael a grateful nod, appreciating the support. He looked around, considering his options. Part of him wanted to let it go, to avoid making a scene, but another part, a stronger part, told him he couldn't just sit back and take it. He didn't need special treatment, but he deserved respect, like any other passenger on this plane. For now, He resolved to sit quietly and observe. He had learned early in life that patience could be just as powerful as action. And sometimes, letting people reveal their true colors worked in his favor. The flight was barely halfway to New York, but for Aaron Green, the journey already felt like an eternity. Every subtle dig, every ignored request, and every whispered remark from Sandra Barnes had taken what should have been a routine flight and turned it into a quiet battleground. He could feel his patience wearing thin, yet he'd held his composure, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. Sandra had continued her routine, serving every passenger around him with a smile that seemed to vanish the moment she approached his row. When she finally did stop by his seat, it was with a look that felt more like a challenge than customer service. He'd asked her for water, just water, but her response had been a dismissive, "Maybe later." And then she'd walked away as if he didn't even exist. Aaron shifted in his seat, feeling the weight of the passenger's eyes on him. He had tried to ignore the whispers, the uncomfortable glances, but the tension had become impossible to dismiss. It was clear Sandra was sending a message, loud and clear, and some passengers had taken the cue to treat him as though he didn't belong in first class. The realization stirred something in him, a quiet, simmering resolve. He hadn't asked for any of this. He'd only wanted a peaceful flight. But dignity was something he wasn't willing to compromise. As Sandra passed by yet again, Aaron decided it was time. He stood up, causing a few heads to turn, and calmly made his way to the front of the plane. He approached another flight attendant, a woman with a warm smile who looked taken aback by his sudden approach. "Excuse me," he said, keeping his voice even. "Is there a customer service supervisor on this flight?" The attendant's eyes widened slightly, and she nodded. "Yes, sir. Let me get her for you." Moments later, Lisa Morgan, the head of customer service, appeared, her expression a mix of professionalism and concern. Aaron explained the situation as calmly as he could, detailing the rude behavior, the repeated dismissal, the whispers, and the constant feeling of being judged for simply occupying the seat he'd paid for. Lisa listened attentively, her face growing more serious with each word. "I'm very sorry about that, Mr. Green," she said, glancing over at Sandra, who had paled slightly, overhearing the conversation. "I assure you, this is not how we treat our passengers. I'll handle it right away." Sandra, realizing the gravity of the situation, tried to casually walk past, but Aaron noticed the shift in her demeanor as soon as his last name was mentioned. Her face drained of color, her confident posture faltered, and she quickly looked away, mumbling something under her breath. Lisa turned to Sandra with a stern look, and the once dismissive flight attendant's bravado dissolved into a look of anxious unease. Aaron felt a flicker of satisfaction, not out of a desire for revenge, but from the relief of seeing his experience taken seriously. Dignity, he thought, was worth standing up for, even if it meant uncomfortable moments like these. Just then, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for any inconvenience. We've been informed of a customer service issue and are working to resolve it. Thank you for your patience." The words reverberated through the cabin, adding a strange sense of finality to the moment. Aaron returned to his seat, the weight of the situation settling over him. He didn't need special treatment, he just wanted respect, the simple acknowledgement of his right to be there. No more, no less. As he sat down, his phone vibrated with a message. To his surprise, it was from his father. "Daniel Green, son, I heard what's happening on the flight. I'm handling it." Aaron's eyes widened. He hadn't told his father anything, so how had he found out? And more importantly, what did he mean by handling it? In the following minutes, Sandra reappeared at his seat, visibly shaken. Her usual cutting tone was gone, replaced by a stammered apology, her gaze fixed anywhere but on him. I'm sorry, Mr. Green. I didn't realize," she began, but the words seemed to falter under the weight of her discomfort. Aaron glanced at her calmly, his expression unreadable. He wanted to believe that her apology came from a genuine place. But he couldn't shake the feeling that it was only her fear of the consequences that had prompted it. In that moment, he realized that standing up for respect meant more than just receiving an apology. It meant confronting the quiet biases that people like Sandra carried with them, day after day. He didn't say anything more, watching as she hurriedly walked away. The other passengers around him, who had once whispered and glanced in judgment, now seemed to avoid his gaze altogether, as if they, too, were embarrassed by what had unfolded. It was a strange, unexpected moment of clarity for Aaron. He hadn't wanted attention, hadn't wanted to make a scene, but in some ways, maybe this moment needed to happen, not just for him, but for everyone who'd witnessed it. As the plane touched down in New York, a quiet sense of relief washed over Aaron Green. The ordeal was almost behind him, and yet, the memory of Sandra Barnes' biting words and dismissive attitude lingered. She had avoided his gaze for the rest of the flight, busying herself with tasks and disappearing down the aisle the moment the plane rolled to a stop. It was clear she wanted to make a quick exit, but fate had other plans. Just as Aaron began gathering his things, he noticed two airline staff members waiting outside the cabin door. Their eyes found him immediately, and they motioned him over with a respectful nod. Slightly puzzled, he followed them out into the terminal, where they led him to a private lounge. Inside, seated comfortably in a plush leather chair, was Daniel Green, his father. Daniel looked up, his eyes softening as they met Aaron's. There was a warmth in his expression, a mixture of pride and quiet understanding that only a father could convey. "Son," he greeted, standing to shake Aaron's hand before pulling him into a brief, reassuring embrace. "I heard about what happened on the flight. Are you all right?" Aaron managed a slight smile. "I'm fine, Dad. I didn't expect this, or you being here." Daniel nodded, his jaw tightening as he took a deep breath. "When I found out, I knew I had to come. Respect is something I built my company on. And if my son can't even feel safe and respected on my own airline..." His voice trailed off, a storm of emotions simmering beneath his calm demeanor. "Well, let's just say, things needed to be addressed." Just then, the lounge door opened, and Lisa Morgan, the head of customer service, stepped in with a purposeful look. She was accompanied by the airline's CEO, Peter Collins, who walked over to shake Aaron's hand. "Aaron," Peter began, his tone formal but sincere, "I'd like to personally apologize for the treatment you received today. We value every passenger who chooses to fly with us, and it's clear that wasn't reflected during your experience." Aaron acknowledged the apology with a polite nod. "Thank you, Mr. Collins. I didn't need special treatment. I just wanted to be treated like everyone else." Peter and Lisa exchanged a look, understanding the depth of his words. Sandra's actions were completely unprofessional and unacceptable, Lisa assured. "She's been removed from duty as of this morning. This kind of behavior has no place in our airline." A pang of sympathy flashed in Aaron's mind. He hadn't wanted anyone to lose their job. He'd only wanted to be respected. "I understand," he said quietly. "But my intention wasn't to see her punished. I only stood up because everyone deserves basic respect." Daniel's hand rested on his son's shoulder, his gaze steady. "You've always had a strong sense of justice, Aaron. You wanted to make your own way, and that's why I'm so proud of you." His voice softened, carrying the weight of years of wisdom. "But sometimes, people need a wake-up call to see the harm their actions cause. Sometimes, standing up for what's right requires others to feel the consequences." Aaron nodded, understanding the lesson beneath his father's words. The confrontation with Sandra wasn't just about his dignity. It was a lesson in accountability, a reminder that actions have consequences, and biases, no matter how subtle, could wound deeply. As they wrapped up their conversation, Peter and Lisa assured Aaron they would implement stricter sensitivity training across the airline staff to prevent future incidents. Their dedication to change felt genuine. and Aaron appreciated that his experience could lead to something positive, perhaps even helping others avoid similar experiences. After the meeting, Aaron and his father walked out of the lounge, heading toward the airport's main exit. A breeze drifted in as the glass doors slid open, and Aaron took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the flight finally lift off his shoulders. "Dad," he said, glancing over at Daniel. "I really didn't want all this attention. I wanted to be able to sit in my seat and get to New York without feeling like I didn't belong." Daniel nodded thoughtfully, his eyes reflecting both pride and understanding. "I know, son, and that's why it mattered. Respect is one of the few things we should never have to demand. It should be given freely, regardless of who you are. People like Sandra need to understand that dignity is something we all carry with us. It's not tied to money, titles, or appearances." Aaron walked beside his father, letting the words sink in. His father had always taught him the value of respect, and today, he'd had to put that teaching into practice. For him, it wasn't about proving his worth or his family's status. It was about showing that he, and everyone else, deserved to be treated with basic human decency. As they reached the curb, a car was waiting to take them into the city. Aaron turned to his father one last time before they climbed in. "Thanks, Dad, for everything. I think today was an important reminder for a lot of people, myself included." Daniel smiled, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Anytime, Aaron. I'm proud of you. Just remember that no matter what people say or think, the respect you carry within yourself is something no one can take away." With that, they climbed into the car, the city stretching out before them, vast and filled with possibility. Aaron knew that he would always face challenges, but today had strengthened something within him, a quiet confidence in his right to be treated with respect, a lesson that would guide him forward, no matter where life took him.